Welcome everyone. My name is Joanne Harris-Duff. I'm the program manager for the Office of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion here at VCU Health. Today is Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Day. This beautiful winter day became a federal holiday in 1983, which honors the life and celebrates Dr. King's birthday as one of the most well-known civil rights leaders of our time. President Ronald Reagan signed the holiday into law in 1983. However, it wasn't officially observed by all 50 states until the year 2000. That's right, a mere 22 years ago. In staying true and committed to VCU Health's commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, we honor the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King today. Again, welcome. On August 28th, 1963, Dr. King delivered the iconic "I Have a Dream" speech on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. The triumphant of the March on Washington and the exposure it brought to the civil rights movement contributed to the passage of the historic Civil Rights Act in 1964, and then shortly the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Today, to celebrate Dr. King, VCU Health welcomes Lynn Haven School to our program. We are honored Lynn Haven students agreed to pay tribute to Dr. King's "I Have a Dream" speech by reading it to all of us today. I am also overjoyed to introduce Mrs. Casey Hitchcock, co-head of school in Lynn Haven, who will introduce the students who are participating today. Mrs. Hitchcock has been working at Lynn Haven School for 5 years. In her role as co-head of school, she leads Lynn Haven's curriculum and instruction, professional development, communications, and business operations of the school. For over a decade, Mrs. Hitchcock has been committed to education, research, mentorship, service learning, and community engagement, and I'm sure so much more. She recently shared with me, quote, "Trust and respect are essential to any relationship and vital to learning. Good mentorship prioritizes the relationship and accelerates growth in both the mentor and mentee." Welcome, Mrs. Hitchcock, and again, thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much, Joanne. On behalf of the Board of Trustees, I want to thank VCU Health Systems for honoring Dr. King by showcasing our students and school on this important day of service. I am proud to be here with 3 of our students to participate in this event today. Lynn Haven has kept service learning and civic engagement at the core of what we do, and these 3 students represent the diversity of our students in their personalities, their interests, and their stories. Amaya is a sophomore in her 3rd year at Lynn Haven. She is an avid dancer and has a goal to be an orthopedic surgeon and is currently researching pre-med programs. Tori is a sophomore and a 1st year at Lynn Haven. Tori is a Missouri native and a musician. She's looking forward to college and is currently deciding on the best path ahead. Dylon is a senior and in his 6th year at Lynn Haven. He's a future African Studies and Sociology major and is in the process of deciding where to go to college from his choice of schools, including VCU, where he has the opportunity to join 2 other Lynn Haven graduates. Amaya, Tori, and Dylon were selected by our faculty to participate in the National Association of Independent Schools Student Diversity Leadership Conference this past November. Today, they will be reciting the entirety of Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech.
Tori, would you like to get us started?
Yes. All right. Okay. I am happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation. 50 years ago, a great American, in whose symbolic shadow we stand today, signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon light of hope to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. But 100 years later, the Negro still is not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. 100 years later, the Negro is still languished in the corners of American society and finds himself in exile in his own land. And so we've come here today to dramatize a shameful condition. In a sense, we've come to our nation's capital to cast a check. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to follow. This note was a promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check, a check that has come back marked insignificant funds. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insignificant funds in the great vaults of opportunity of this nation. We ought to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. This is no time to engage in luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Now is the time to make the real promises of democracy. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children. It would be fatal for the nation to overlook the urgency of the moment. This sweltering summer of the Negro's legitimate discontent will not pass until there is an invading autumn of freedom and equality. 1963 is not an end, but a beginning. Those who hoped that the Negro needed to blow off steam and will now be content will have a rude awakening if the nation returns to business as usual. There will neither be rest nor tranquility in America until the Negro is granted his citizenship rights. The whirlwinds of revolt will continue to shake the foundations of our nation until the bright day of justice emerges.
But there is something that I must say to my people, who stand on the warm threshold which leads into the palace of justice. In the process of gaining our rightful place, we must not be guilty of wrongful deeds. Let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. We must forever conduct our struggle on the height of dignity and discipline. We must not allow our creative protests to degenerate in physical violence. Again and again, we must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force. The marvelous new militancy which has engulfed the Negro community must not lead us to distrust of all of white people. For many of our white brothers, as evidenced by their presence here today, have come to realize that their destiny is tied up with our destiny. And they have come to realize that their freedom is inseparably bound to our freedom. We cannot walk alone. As we walk, we must make the pledge that we shall always march ahead. We cannot turn back. There are those who are asking the devotees of civil rights, when will you be satisfied? We can never be satisfied as long as the Negro is a victim of unspeakable horrors of police brutality. We can never be satisfied as long as our bodies, heavy with fatigue of travel, cannot gain lodging in the motels of highways and the hotels of cities. We cannot be satisfied as long as the Negro's basic mobility is from a smaller ghetto to a larger one. We can never be satisfied as long as our children are stripped of their self-hold and robbed of their dignity by signs stating "for whites only." We cannot be satisfied as long as a Negro of Mississippi cannot vote and a Negro of New York believes he has nothing for which to vote. No, we are not satisfied, and we will never be satisfied until justice rolls down like the waters in righteousness, like a mighty stream. I am not unmindful that some of you have come here out of great trials and tribulations. Some of you have come fresh from narrow jail cells. Some of you have come from areas where quest for freedom was battered by storms of persecution and staggered by the winds of police brutality. You have been veterans of creative suffering. Continue to work with the faith that unearned suffering is redemptive. Go back to Mississippi. Go back to Alabama. Go back to South Carolina. Go back to Georgia. Go back to Louisiana. Go back to the slums and ghettos of our northern cities, knowing that somehow this situation can and will be changed. Let us not wallow in the valley of despair. I say to you today, my friends, so even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal.
I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day, even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of oppression, sweltering with the heat of injustice, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day down in Alabama, with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification, one day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted and every hill and mountain shall be made low. The rough places will be made plain and the crooked places will be made straight. And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed and all flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is the faith that I go back to the South with. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jingling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we'll be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. This will be the day. This will be the day when all of God's children will be able to sing with new meaning. My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of pilgrims' pride, from every mountainside, let freedom ring. And if America is to be a great nation, this must become true. And so let freedom ring from the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire. Let freedom ring from the mighty mountains of New York. Let freedom ring from the heightening Alleghanies of Pennsylvania. Let freedom ring from the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado. Let freedom ring from the curvaceous slopes of California. But not only that, let freedom ring from the Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from the Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi, from every mountainside. Let freedom ring. And when this happens, and when we allow freedom ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up the day when all of God's children, Black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual. Free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
Wow. Wow. I am absolutely proud and overtaken with how beautiful you all did. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I know that you truly are representing why Mr. Jonathan Harris founded Lynn Haven School. In reading his quote, you are expected to be nothing but the real you always, is what you all did today. You are changing the world. Congratulations on today. I'm so very proud of you. Dylan, I hope that you choose VCU as your school of choice. We would love to have you. You represent who we are. Okay, I'm going to get it together because I'm so very proud of all of you. All right. I am so excited about introducing one of my most favorite people here at VCU Health, Dr. Marcelle Davis. She is the vice president of the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at VCU Health. She was initially hired as the first director of DEI in November 2020. Quickly, Dr. Davis was promoted and honored as vice president. This promotion came to no one's surprise. Rather, this offered many of us hope and inspiration. If you visit the VCU Health Diversity, Equity, Inclusion website, there are many things you'll learn about Dr. Davis. She was born in Guyana. She moved to Brooklyn, New York when she was 11. You will learn that she is truly driven by diversity, equity, and inclusion. You will learn that Dr. Davis received her doctorate in strategic leadership. She has published several articles in academic journals on the topics of global leadership, inclusive leadership, and diversity at the leadership level. The powerful research from her doctorate degree was published in her book entitled Measuring Inclusive Leadership with Grace, a step-by-step guide to recognizing and advancing inclusion in the workplace, which is what her keynote is focused on today. What you won't read about on the website or anywhere on the web are the words of people here at VCU Health in our community who feel honored and, yes, inspired by her work every day. Quotes from many people. The first one, quote, "She's known to many as Dr. Davis, but is known to me as simply Marcelle. Marcelle is and has been a beacon of light in a dark and uncertain place for me. Yes, Marcelle, your mom is smiling from heaven at you, my friends. Keep up the magnificent work and know that I, your friend and colleague, is extremely proud of you." The next quote, "Dr. Davis has been a shining star for VCU Health since her arrival. Her kind, welcoming, and open spirit have made so many of our colleagues feel valued. Her collaborative spirit and ability to build consensus are remarkable." The next quote, "When you meet Marcelle for the first time, you are instantly aware of genuine presence, which remains consistent as you get to know her more. She's optimistic, passionate, and steadfast in her challenging work. I have no doubt she will make her mark on changing the world." From my first meeting with Marcelle, my impression of her has been how much she emphasizes the definition of grace. She displays an elegance, a smoothness in her conversation and movement. She demonstrates at all times a courageous good will that reflects an attractive, polite manner. And what is obvious to those of us who have been privileged to know her, she has the continuous favor of God. Grace is also the title of her book, an excellent read for those who have not done so. I am privileged to know her and work with her. The next quote, "Marcelle fosters a collective, safe environment that challenges and enables others to learn, change, and grow as individual people and as stronger, more inclusive communities." The next quote, "Marcelle lights up a room with her smile, warms our hearts with her words, and stretches our minds with her wisdom." And the last quote here, "Dr. Davis is a dynamic, thoughtful, and courageous leader. She has already had a large impact on our organization as we move to a more equitable diverse, and inclusive organization. Great things are happening at VCU Health under her leadership. I'm honored to welcome my friend and boss, Dr. Marcel Davis. Welcome.
Many, many thanks to everyone who submitted quotes. To say I am emotional at the moment is an understatement. I am incredibly touched and honored to be here with all of you today, and to say that I have the privilege of being a part of VCU Health is an understatement. But Joanne, many, many thanks to you as our health systems inaugural program manager for putting together today's amazing program and for inviting me to be a part of this occasion. But before I jump in, I wanted to say, how about those Lynn Haven students? Oh my goodness. So I'm so proud of how you delivered Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech. I think we all felt a magnitude of emotions. I know I did as each of you read through it, because personally, it gave me a moment to reflect on the magnitude, the pure magnitude of Dr. King's words. Joanne, you shared that that speech was delivered on August 28th, 1963, and it was delivered to a large group of civil rights marchers who were gathered around the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. And Dr. King believed that unity is up to all of us, right? He dreamt of a world where unarmed truth and unconditional love should always have the final word. And as we think about empowering the community, which is the theme that governs our time together today, the word service keeps coming to mind for me. And regardless of what industry you're in, serving others is only effective when you are an inclusive leader. As a healthcare system, service begins and ends with our patient in mind, regardless of the dimension of diversity that that patient embodies. And because of that, inclusive leadership is that much more important. And across the quarter of a century that I have done this work, there are many leaders who sadly don't understand what inclusion looks like or what inclusive leadership means. So when I was going through my doctoral program, my dissertation chair encouraged me to write a manuscript. And Joanne indicated that that manuscript was published into a book in 2019 called Measuring Inclusive Leadership with Grace. And I really wanted to spend a little bit of time with you today talking about grace. First, I wanted to start with how the idea of grace came about. So my dissertation chair continuously told me that I had a voice that needed to be heard. And as a woman of color, oftentimes the imposter syndrome kicks in. And that wasn't any different at that time. And I kept thinking, I don't have that much to say. And even if I had something to say, nobody really wants to listen. She continued to encourage me. And she said, a manuscript is only 10 papers. It's 10 chapters, 10 papers. You can do it. So I said to myself, I could do that. I could write a paper. I just have to figure out what I wanted to say. And that I couldn't quite figure out. For months, I racked my brain, and all I knew was it had to be about inclusive leadership. So my brain, the more the pressure mounted, the more silent my brain was. And then in August of 2017, when I was in Maryland at gymnastics camp with my daughter, I was running on the treadmill in the gym at the hotel, and the AC was broken. So I'm still trying to ponder this manuscript. What would I write about? The AC is not working. I'm sweating profusely. I wiped the sweat off my forehead, and instantly I knew what I would write about. Grace was born. So I ran back upstairs to my room and I sat down, didn't even take a shower. I just sat down at my computer and started to write. And before I knew it, I had completed the first 3 chapters of that book. Within a month, I had completed it. It took 3 months to edit and send it over to my dissertation chair, 3 rounds of edits. So let me tell you about Grace. When I tell you it's my baby, it's my baby. And it's a lot for me to share it, right? Because it's really personal. So Grace is comprised of 5 critical core competencies that an inclusive leader must have. The model fits neatly on the palm of your hand. And each competency is aligned with a single digit or finger based on whether a leader can be inclusive by only having that one competency, or if that competency must be paired with another one. Joanne, do you mind pulling up that visual of the hand? Beautiful. So you'll see the first critical competency will start with the pinky. The first critical competency that an inclusive leader should have is grounded. A leader who is grounded for the most part is self-aware, right? In other words, they know where their strengths and weaknesses lie, and they're self-aware of how they react in situations and how they interact with those around them. When a leader is grounded, it's usually because they're motivated by something that allows them to live their lives in a meaningful way. For us as healthcare providers, that thing more than likely is our patients. For me, as a DEI professional, that thing is ensuring that I influence one person or one thing a day to create meaningful change. The entire list of what keeps many of us grounded can be exhausting because it includes things like serving others, our faith, our family, the opportunity to learn, a hobby, a healthy lifestyle. The list goes on and on. A leader who's grounded always has something to work toward, even during times when it seems like they're the only one who is supporting a particular cause or effort. Grounded, though, is founded on the pinky, and some experts argue that the pinky finger is the least often utilized of our 5 fingers, and that it possesses the most diminished range of motion. The same is true for the competency grounded. It is necessary for a leader to be inclusive, but it cannot stand alone. So let's think about pairing it with the ring finger, which stands for receptive. Grounded and receptive are intricately woven together. And you'll recall that I mentioned a leader who is grounded is self-aware of their own individual intellect. In other words, they know they're not an expert in all areas and they're comfortable with that fact. The competency receptive builds on that idea because an inclusive leader knows that in order to create and maintain a competitive advantage, they must remain open to learning from others, regardless of how different that person may be. This leader welcomes difference because they understand that diversity drives innovation and opens the door to developing creative solutions for themselves, members of their team, and ultimately their organization. A leader who is receptive must first be grounded in who they are and be well-versed in their own individual strengths and weaknesses. And that's important because a leader must understand their own shortcomings and lack of knowledge before they can open themselves up to learning from someone else. So that's grounded and receptive. Now let's take a look at the third competency that an inclusive leader must have, which is agility. You'll notice that agility is strategically placed on the middle finger of the hand. This is intentional, and it was intentional on my part because the middle finger is not only the longest and the biggest of the fingers on our hand, but it's also the strongest. Since this finger is located in the center of our hand, it functions more like an axis when it comes to rotation. And as a result of this rotational ability, the middle finger can be utilized for strength, precision, or power. The same is true for a leader who is agile. First, there's cultural agility, where a leader has the ability to view situations in the workplace from the perspectives of others, instead of only through their own lens. This leader can also accept different beliefs and behaviors when they're approaching and addressing challenges. For us as healthcare providers, that is critical because when a patient walks in the door, we have no idea what their culture is. Cultural agility is critical. The second kind of agility is operational agility, where mistakes are considered opportunities for learning and best practices, right? Again, as healthcare providers, we have got to learn to navigate operational agility. We think about the pandemic. We've constantly had to pivot our operations to manage the influx and the increase in volume of those needing our help, our service. The third kind of agility is organizational agility. That enables a leader to respond to changes that are both internal and external to the organization without losing momentum or vision. And these three types of agility help to shape the behavior of an inclusive leader. And they ultimately provide that leader with the foundation necessary for them to be effective in their individual role, thereby advancing the mission of the organization. Let's take a look at the fourth competency, which is curious. C stands for curious. That lives on our index finger. That finger is developed to partner with other fingers for key movements. Curiosity drives the ability to ask questions. Let's think about when we're children, we constantly ask why, right? Why is the sky blue? Why do we have to do this? Why do we have to do that? The older we get, the less we tend to ask why. That's because we're afraid to challenge the status quo. If we can't challenge the status quo, how can we create meaningful change? Curiosity is that strong desire to know or learn something. An inclusive leader who is curious is also skilled at listening and working with others without passing judgment or making assumptions about that individual. That's because they have a genuine desire to understand someone else's perspective because they know that that could shed light on how that perspective aligns with the vision. The final competency an inclusive leader should be equipped with is ethics. That sits on our thumb. The thumb can touch any other finger and partner. Ethics is the thing that governs the way we behave, right? That thumb is the most important digit of all our fingers. It's got the greatest range of motion than all the other fingers of the hand. Because when it partners with the other fingers, it assists in functionality. It also plays a vital role in helping us to hold on to things, right? Let's think about ethics being the moral code by which we live. It is that thing that shapes our values. Ethics helps us to determine right from wrong. It serves as the foundation for our standard of behavior. Let's go back to Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech. He gave us his moral code. He told us what he expected, what was necessary in order to create meaningful change. That is directly tied to ethics. It is at the core of our ability to be grounded, to be receptive, to be agile, to be curious. More importantly, ethics shapes how all of these behaviors are displayed during our interactions with everyone around us. And when I think about Dr. King and the values that he not only lived by, but he empowered us to mirror, and we saw a glimpse during his I Have a Dream speech. I think about Dr. King and I think about that I Have a Dream speech, and I think about utilizing grace and the fact that all of those things gives us the foundation to serve our community through inclusion. Why? Why is that so important? It's simple. Through inclusion, we can grow leaders who work to eliminate prejudice and achieve equal rights for all humanity. Through inclusion, we can eliminate health disparities so that we accept nothing less than using equity as that stick by which we measure ourselves. Through inclusion, I never have to explain to my daughter with her beautiful brown skin why she is judged so differently when she competes at gymnastics or in her classroom. Through inclusion, we can transform ourselves, our teams, our organization, and our society. And through inclusion, we never have to worry about a patient walking through our doors and feel like they were discriminated against, treated differently, or were exposed to racial bias of any kind. Inclusion is an action word. I encourage each of you today to have grace with yourselves and each other. Thank you for the opportunity to spend a little bit of time with you today. Joanne, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. If we were in person today, you would have a standing ovation because your guidance and your keynote is incredibly powerful. And I hope that we all are able to lead in our own way with grace, that we're able to follow your groundedness, receptiveness, agility, curiosity, and your ethical nature. Thank you very, very much. I'm absolutely honored. What I want to quickly talk about before we close is what Dr. Davis has laid the groundwork for. From the beginning of her employment at VCU Health to right now in her keynote. And that is her vision. To honor that vision, what the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion will do this year is we will follow a theme of empowering community. So throughout the year, we will have programs that are grounded with grace, if you will, with how we can make one another better. So our next big program is going to be on February the 9th at 12 p.m. We'll be honoring Black History Month. We are fortunate that we will have Dr. Amy Tillerson Brown, who is the Dean for the School of Mary Baldwin University. And she is the Director and Chair for Africana Studies. She's going to be with us today. She has had many students who have decided to go to VCU. She encourages students to attend our school because she knows how powerful we can be. She also knows that our health system offers so much beautiful care to our patients. In closing, also, I want to have a special shout out to Adam Austin, who has his camera off, but he has had his camera on and supported our work in diversity, equity, and inclusion. Every time we have a program, whenever you read anything on the VCU DEI intranet, and I'm sure many more pages, you will see that he has always made sure that this work is highlighted and is honored. So thank you very much, Adam. I want to say another thank you to Lynn Haven School, to Mrs. Hitchcock, to Mr. Harris, and to our phenomenal students, Tori, Maya, and Dylan. Thank you for being here today. You are absolutely wonderful, and we will follow in your light, students. Thank you so very much. I hope everyone has a wonderful MLK Day. Remember, today is a day on, not a day off. Everyone have a great day and enjoy one another. Goodbye.